Yaradumarang, hello and welcome to this very special APA eTalk as we yarn with two outstanding leaders of our profession on reconciliation and discuss parts we can all play in making a better future for Australia. My name is Michael Reynolds, a proud Aboriginal man of Wiradjuri descent and APA sports and exercise physiotherapist and your host for this eTalk. As is customary, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the First Peoples and traditional owners of the lands and waterways in which we're speaking from. For me today, I'm on Wurundjeri lands of the Kulin Nations, and at the moment, I'd like you, our audience, to take pause and pay respects to the traditional custodians from wherever you're watching this today. Our First Nations peoples have faithfully cared for our country for countless millennia, and I acknowledge our elders past, present, and emerging for their continued wisdom and guidance. Australia's First Peoples are not one people, but many peoples comprising of over 250 language groups that have endured the test of time. 65,000 to over 80,000 years ago by scientific reckoning, but to us, since the beginning of time. It's been a place of rich, vibrant culture, language, a beautiful country cared for throughout history, and one which all Australians hold very dear to their hearts. So how can we move on from such a schism that was created by colonisation of these lands, which we call Australia? How can we repair the deep intergenerational trauma that persists in our lands? And how can Australia, with you, the listeners, embrace and honour Australia's First Peoples cultures, their traditional lands to make us, whole as a nation? These conversations are central to the health and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and for the broader healing our nation needs to be whole. To help us on our journeys of reconciliation, I'm incredibly privileged to introduce Palawa man Scott Willis and Kamilaroi woman Katie Potter. Hi, Scott.
G'day, Mick. How are you?
G'day, Katie.
Yeah, I'm a Scott. Yeah, I'm a Mick. Yeah, I'm a Scott. Sorry, Mick.
Now, both of you have quite an outstanding background, and I just want to share with the listeners a little bit of your bio, and then we want to hear a little bit about your stories. Scott is the first Indigenous man to be elected as National President of the Australian Physiotherapy Association. He graduated from the University of Sydney with a Bachelor of Applied Science in Physiotherapy before moving to the northwest coast of Tasmania, where he's co-director of a multidisciplinary clinic. He has experience within the public, primary health, private practice, rural, Indigenous, aged care and occupational health sectors, having held a number of leadership roles. Scott has extensive knowledge and experience in the policy, advocacy and the political arena. He's held positions on the Board of Directors of the Division of General Practice in Northwest Tasmania, Tasmania's Medicare Locals Primary Healthcare Strategic Advisory Council, and the Clinical Advisory Council of Primary Health Tasmania. Scott has held numerous positions within the APA, including National Chair of the Business Group, Member of the National Advisory Committee, Branch Councillor of the Tasmanian Branch, Director of the APA Board and Chair of the Insurance Safety Subcommittee. Kathryn Potter is a Kamilaroi woman and an advanced physiotherapist who has worked in the hospital and health service for 15 years, practicing as a physiotherapist for 12 of those and as a physiotherapy Indigenous cadet for 3. She's currently working part-time in a research facilitation role within the Women's, Men's and Pelvic Health Service at Logan Hospital. Kathryn has a special interest in both women's, men's and pelvic health and respiratory health and is a member of both APA special interest groups. She's also the founding and managing director of the Indigenous-owned company named Physiotherapy Innovations. Kathryn's been recognised for her work in Indigenous health and recently received an award acknowledging this work from the APA Queensland branch in 2018. She's also a member of a number of boards and committees, including the National APA Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Committee, You Fella, Me Fella Mentoring Program Advisory Board in Inala, Queensland, Close the Gap Committee at a local hospital, the Queensland University Physiotherapy Course Reference Committee, and is an exclusive member of the Australian and New Zealand Indigenous Women in Business Leadership Group. Kathryn enjoys working from both hospital and health service and the business platforms to help as many people as possible and give back to the Indigenous community wherever she can. Some bios, and I'm really privileged to talk to you both. And Scott, first I want to start with you. I mean, I'm in awe of what you've achieved in such a short space of time with the APA. Can you tell us a little bit about how your journey started?
Yeah, look, thanks, Mick. Look, first off, I just want to really acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I'm coming from, as you mentioned, the Palawa people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and also emerging. And the way they've looked after, the land, the waterways, but the crystal clear and clean atmosphere here in Tasmania as well. And I think, without them and without their passion and drive to look after that, we wouldn't be in a position that we are today. So I really want to pay my respects, but also acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the call today. So welcome, and thanks for tuning in and listening to myself, Katie, and you, Mick, as well. So look, I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney on Darug land and was raised by a working class family with no real significant links with my Indigenous heritage. We often hear about the stolen generation, but I see my life as the lost generation. I often talk about that, where I feel that my and our Indigenous heritage was lost. And that's no fault of anyone, no blame of my family or anyone like that. I knew of my Indigenous background, but was never encouraged to really follow it, never to really dig deep into it or even investigate it. But it's been my real journey as a physiotherapist, and especially the roles I've had in the APA, that's really made me safe to really start to express and start my own personal journey of reconciliation, but also discovery, which is really, really important when you're going through this type of process. So if I take you back, when I was 15, I injured my knee. Had a meniscal injury playing every sport possible growing up. Had a scope, had to have pre and post physio. Didn't really know what the physio career was until I started to investigate it and go down the path of a patient. And thought, okay, that could be a good career. So I thought, yep, let's go down that career. But at high school was told by a school teacher that I wasn't smart enough. I should look at elsewhere. I come from the western suburbs of Sydney, that I had no chance of actually starting or even finishing a physio career. So people that know me really know that if anyone says that to me, I'm going to change that way. I did go to uni. I got into Sydney Uni, doing my physiotherapy degree. Failed a subject my first year. Started to question whether the teacher was correct, and I didn't have that drive, or didn't have that knowledge, or anything to finish the degree. But I stuck at it and graduated as a physiotherapist, and then moved on to Tasmania, because when I graduated there was hardly any physio jobs as allocation at that time because the health budget was cut. So came down to Tassie. And started in the hospital system, going through all my rotation for about 3.5 years before becoming a senior inpatient physio at the Northwest Regional Hospital here in Burnie, Tasmania. And that's where I pretty much started my look at the whole breadth of physio, the large or the significant church that we call it. And I was covering everything from ICU to orthopedics, pediatrics, medical, surgical, mental health wards, all of the above. But then I had an opportunity that came about, that a private practice was looking for a physio, and I just thought I probably need to broaden my horizons a little bit more. So I started working here at Coastal Physio on the Northwest Coast and became a business partner. And now it's grown to employ over 10 clinical staff and 3 non-clinical staff in a multidisciplinary clinic. And we usually across the breadth of the whole of physiotherapy pathway. APA-wise, I think I've been on the Tasmanian Branch Council, National Chair of the Business Group, sat on the National Advisory Council, before then being elected to the Board of Director in 2019, which I think was one of a great achievement, but also an honour to actually serve on your professional body's board as a leader. And I think that really set the scene and really took me to a new level that I never thought I would get to. So that's then came to being elected as the national president in 2021, where I'm currently sitting, and my term ends at the end of this year, where hopefully I can do another term if the board so see fit. It's been an amazing journey, and like you said, it's been quite a quick journey when you look back. But if anyone had told me that, that where I'm sitting now, back say 30 years ago, I would have said that there's no possible way. One, would I have even been a physio? If I listened to my teacher back in those early years, if I'd even be a physio, where now I'm the national president of the professional body. If anyone thought that, not feeling very safe to identify as an Indigenous person, where now I'm leading the Reconciliation Action Plan of the APA, the professional body that represents our profession. And then hopefully leading other Indigenous physios or even high school students, that anything is possible. And I think that's one of my main aims now, is to, use my story as being knocked down but getting back up. To using my position to broaden the horizons of every Australian, but especially every physiotherapist, to ensure that they know the why we do reconciliation, the why it's important that we start talking about this, but also taking people on their own personal and professional journey as well. So it makes me very proud to be national president of this association, this profession. And I'm just so excited to take on this role and meet people like yourselves.
Thanks, Scott. That's a beautiful story, and you mentioned the lost generation, and I think our new generation's being found, and I'm really privileged to call you a brother, really, and your position of leadership, I know, is a beacon of sorts, or it's something that certainly I look up to. I know many others look up to know that things are possible, because like you, I never thought these things were possible when I was a kid. And now that I know that my kids know that anything's possible. Yeah. Katie, whenever I speak with you, I always leave our conversations with this incredible strength. And the way you speak helps me reflect on all those places that I draw strength from. That fire and passion you bring to our world has to come from somewhere. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Okay, thank you, Mick. And no matter how many times I hear either of your stories, it still brings me a big smile. And I just want to say, I am so proud to have you both as friends, and have been able to get to know you both, and so proud of you both for your achievements in APA and the APC, everything all in this space. And I draw from you both all the time to keep moving forward too. So I think you helped me to keep that fire in my belly, and we can do anything is achievable, which is something that our families weren't able to say previously. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the country that I'm working and living and playing on, I say, is Yugambeh country in southeast Queensland, so in the Logan area. And I would like to pay respects to the elders past, present and future for maintaining this beautiful area. I'm really lucky to have a really beautiful view from my veranda, and I see out to Mount Tambourine and things, and I always really appreciate that I can see that, and have lots of native birds always flying past every day. And I do think that that's in part because of what our ancestors have maintained for us to some degree. So my family is from Boggabilla Toomala area, so I'm a Kamilaroi woman. My grandma, some of her sisters, because there was different parents involved, so different skin colors in her family, so she was separated. The three older girls were separated from the family, and she worked as a maid. So that's sort of the start of our story there. And I think I haven't actually mentioned this yet to anyone who may have listened to previous discussions I've had, but it was last year that she actually got her payout for her stolen wages. So if we're talking reconciliation, that was a long time ago. So she is 80-something now, and she was 14 when she had to start working as a, I would say a slave. I know that's really hard to hear, but that's what it is when you work with no pay. When you're not volunteering. And so Nana learnt very quickly to survive by disassociating her Aboriginality, but she always maintained a family connection, which was really, really lovely. So I think she kind of did that under the radar as much as possible. So that allowed my mum and her sisters and brothers to reconnect with their family along the way, which was fantastic. So they can remember playing down on the missions and things like that, which is really nice when mum tells me those stories. And she can remember her uncles back then. So for them all to know each other as adults, I think was really important. But it also meant that I got to meet these amazing family members and learn a lot more of my culture as well. And we were just embraced with open arms. You know, it was quite heartfelt across the board, and a real spiritual connection with the family and with the land particularly. Like, it's amazing to have that feeling. I don't belong to a religion, but that spiritual connection that I have with country is just you. It's one of those things that you say that is just definitely in your blood, you know, because I didn't know that when I was little. So I was actually born in Brisbane, so Meanjin, and always grew up in the south side as well. So I grew up in Camira. There's a song by a rapper, Lissy. It's like repping the 4300, so it's kind of the equivalent to Redfern, I guess. So you know, I'm from the same sort of area. So my family grew up, mum and dad grew up in Inala and Oxley. I grew up in Camira, which is all around Gales and Goodna, Redbank, all those areas. So definitely south side issues. And so the same sentiments as Scott at school. You know, we just weren't encouraged by our teachers and schoolmates. You know, I excelled in sport like most of us did, and that was one of the main reasons I went to school, is to play sport. My mum and dad didn't finish school, but that didn't mean they didn't encourage me. They just didn't really know the system or how, you know, but mum always was saying how proud she was that I used to do my homework, and I just thought that was weird. Like, I just thought you had to do homework, you know. So it was like a concept so different to them. So I wanted to be a physiotherapist, but I wasn't able to go straight into physiotherapy with my marks. But I think that I was more successful than the teachers ever assumed I would be. I was able to get into university, and I went to study science. So I've always loved science in general, particularly when it comes to the human body or biology and animal studies. So I studied ecology for a while, and really enjoyed doing all the work, going out to different sites and being on the land and assessing like the environment of the animals, but the ecosystems, I should say. But it was quite lonely. It was a very lonely job, and you would be like camping for months on end collecting data, and I was like, I can't do this forever. So it was like, no, I need to move back to that physiotherapy path that I wanted, and be able to be a lot more engaged with people every day. And I think those who know me, I love a good yarn. So you can imagine I'd go a bit stir crazy in the bush for 3 months by myself. So I worked for some time to save some money so that I could go to uni and have an apartment. Mum and dad sold their place with a breakup, and both were absent from our life. And so I basically, as a 17-year-old, had to look after myself. So I think that's kind of where a lot of that fire comes, and just that determination and fight. I feel like I've been fighting a long time, and sometimes that comes through, and I try to control that a little bit, but sometimes you might see that, and you hopefully then that can help you to understand where that comes from. So saved some money, did some work in, you know, retail for a year, and then went into human movement so that I could upgrade into physiotherapy. So I got in that way. Had to take it slowly purely because of finances. So studied for part-time for over 2 years to upgrade, and then got through. And then I was still working a lot. So that was where it was really, really hard to actually retain the information and study effectively when, you know, I was working so many shifts a week so that I could cover my own rent and things. And I mean, just to show like how different lifestyles are, like I remember in ecology for trips and stuff, I either couldn't go or I had to get university loans so that I could just go on the prac trips. And some days I couldn't even afford to go to uni, and my little brother's like finding me $1 here and there so I could catch a train to get to uni, like crazy stuff to think about, you know, what I had to go through to be able to do it. But, you know, stayed strong and I knew that it was something I enjoyed. So I think to me too, it doesn't matter how smart you are. I think it's what you're passionate about. And when you're passionate about something, to me, it's easy to learn. And so I feel like the quotas for university positions is important because if you just go on a competitive mark, you know, an OP1 student, and they said OP1 students are very competitive, or it's not even OP anymore, sorry, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. They'll be able to manage and do the university, just excluding a whole lot of people that can be amazing physiotherapists who are amazing carers. And so I think that it's really important that we open up that system. Because sometimes the smartest people aren't always the best bedside, you know, don't have always the best bedside manners, things like that. So, you know, I think there's different ways that we can assess, but that'll keep moving in the future. So through university, through physiotherapy, I was eventually brave enough to mark that I was actually Aboriginal. I'd never marked it before because I was actually worried about what that meant. And I then got invited to be part of the Indigenous unit at the university, and then was offered a cadetship. So from the second year to the fourth year, I worked as a physiotherapy cadet during the breaks at university. So I worked for the Queensland Health Public System. And so that took a massive load off, because that means I didn't have to do the, 4 or 5 shifts a week outside of uni, and could concentrate a lot better. So I think that helped me get through physio a lot more. And I graduated with honours, you know, so I'm so proud of that, you know, that I was able to do that. You shaved a couple of years off in the bio, and I was going to say, if you can shave off some years, if you ever mention my age, would be great. So I've been working 15 years in the as a physio and another 3 as a cadet, so 18 years in total for Queensland Health. Have maintained being a loyal public health worker, although I do lots of other things. I've always had a position there, and I feel like I pay that back because of the cadetship that was offered to me. So then I did start a business early in my physio career, or started working on the product, and then the business came about a little bit later once we had everything set up. And so that's been going really well. I found that I've been able to do a lot of consulting work through the business as well. And so bringing all those professional skills as a physio, and then all the different business acumen that I've learnt, and so working from different platforms and sort of even being able to combine them is just really exciting for me, to be able to, you know, provide to the community and meet so many awesome people like yourselves. So we were the first Indigenous business to get this particular grant called Ignite Ideas grant through the government, and that helped me to export our product to America. So I'm very, very proud to say that it's on the American shores now, and our website's live, and so that's really cool. And we currently employ over 70% Indigenous staff, and so I feel like, you know, that's another way that I can give back and help with social determination and economic development. So that's sort of the platforms that I work from, and heavily involved in the APA sorry about my computer doing that. The new chair following yourself, Mick, on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Committee. So just started that in January this year, and also joined the RAP committee, which is great. And enjoying every moment of being part of the APA in different ways, and I'm always just so proud to be working under their banner. So thank you for listening.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Katie. I think Scott, you talked about the lost generation. I'm so glad we found Katie for our profession. I'm so glad the nation found Katie. And I'm so glad that what really resonated with me there was how strong family and the lands were. You're in Yugonbeh country at the moment, looking out the window and drawing great strength and understanding of the world around you, and the lens in which you see that, I think is central to, I think the way all Australians should be looking at things, but maybe that's just my biases coming into it, but certainly the lens in which Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people view health and well-being. But we know that Australia's not there yet, I think. I think from both of your stories and those that have heard mine, we all have common challenges that I think a lot of our First Nations physiotherapists and physiotherapist students might be able to relate with. And those things need to be put right. We need to make sure we have opportunities like that, so we have great leaders like yourself that can come to the fore and help guide the profession and others to put things right. So I'll put it to you, and Martin Luther King talked about an often quoted quote that he had a dream. I have a dream. So I'll start with you, Scott. What does your dream for a Reconciled Australia look like? It's a huge question, but in a few words, what do you think a Reconciled Australia looks like?
Yeah, look, I often use this quote, and you know, Mick and Katie, that I'm always an optimist and always look to an end point and then move backwards. I look for that northern star and set the scene, and then map out our journey of how I'm going to get there or how we're going to get there. And reconciliation should not be any different. So for me, I want to see that there is no racism or discrimination in Australia and for all Australians. I want to see equity and equality in Australia. I want to see that all the gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples closed. And that includes like life expectancy, healthy birth rates, attaining a Year 12 qualification, attaining tertiary qualifications, youth employment, appropriate housing, and also that real one that is just unbelievable is that incarceration as well. Is there's such an inequality there. I'd love to see all Australians get the same opportunities. You talk, we talk about what Katie went through and what you have, Mick, and what I have as well. We need to have the same opportunities wherever you're born, in whatever race you're born, whatever influences you bring to the table. We need to have access to all services equally. We should have no biases or uninformed information that really drives our thought processes as well. But I think for me, we all need to celebrate together, because I think we live in the best part of the world here in Australia, but I still think it can be better. And reconciliation is part of that, making the world better, but making Australia better and bringing everyone together to come and see that northern light, to see where we need to be, but also to hold hands and share that journey along the way. And I think that's my dream.
That's a dream worth dreaming, and I hope we see that reality soon. Katie, what's your dream? What does a Reconciled Australia look like to you?
I feel like it would be very balanced, and I talk about peaceful. I feel like it would be everybody respecting everybody's views and appreciating the values of diversity. And as Scott said too, and even moving beyond equity, to just think that you could live in a world of equality would be really lovely. I feel like for me, it would mean Indigenous people not having to give up as much and not having to fight as much to have that reconciliation, to not only respect each other as people, but to respect our culture and respect our lands, and to look after our lands better than we do. To me, that's really important. And I think a big part of reconciliation, so more than just the people.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Katie. Oh, I think great dreams, and I think the listeners will agree that they're things worth fighting for. They're things worth working towards. Moving on to National Reconciliation Week. That's coming up soon, and this podcast, or this eTalk, will be launched during Reconciliation Week. And this week's theme, this National Reconciliation Week's theme is Be Brave, Make Change. I do hope children are no longer taught in schools that Captain Cook discovered these lands in 1770 and were first settled with the first fleet, like I was. The cultural awareness of our nation and the profession is shifting. It's growing. There's a greater amount of knowledge, but we're all being asked to be brave and make the next step. Scott, I'll start with you. Can you tell us what the APA is doing, so its history, and what it's doing now to be culturally brave into the future?
Yeah, look, it's a very, very good question. I often look backwards so that I can move forwards, and reconciliation within the APA journey and my position as the president of the APA really makes me do that quite often, and reconciliation is no different. So for me, the APA has been on its own journey, and I must make mention of Marcus Strips, Phil Calvert and Chris Mastis, and now Onion Nikolic, who've really got behind reconciliation and really driven it to where it is today. We started, I think, from the wilderness with reconciliation, and from all the efforts of these leaders, we're in a really great position to be brave and to make change, I think. I think every RAP that the APA has done over the years, so this is our third one that we've just launched now, it's really pushed the boundaries and really stepped up from the last one. So it's always that stepping, which is, I think, a testament, and also the journey that the APA has been on. I think the main area that we've got better at is implementing but holding each other accountable. And that's also looking at the engagement, but also the opportunities that arise as well. We're very, very good at that now. We're no longer just happy just to sit back and wait for someone else to do it. We and the board are very, very overt that we want to be industry leaders in reconciliation. It's in our strategic plan as an organisation, and it's got deliverables. Very rarely do you see in a strategic plan for reconciliation with deliverables as well. I can tell you now that the board is very, very strong on this and will push to get those deliverables delivered. And that's what makes me so proud of the journey that the APA has been on, and also the growth and the maturity of the organisation, but also the profession as well. I just don't want this to live on the shelf. I just don't want reconciliation just to be forgotten. I think when you read the RAP, it's going to start to push our implementation and hold ourselves even more accountable. And I think that's really, really important that we keep doing that. I think we started to look for opportunities to push Indigenous leaders, like the scholarships for students doing physiotherapy, physiotherapists to attend conferences, leaders to do the AICD board course, like Katie was the first one this year to. Congratulations, Katie. I look so much forward to seeing you develop even further. I think to partner with external stakeholders to really assist communities reduce some of the health and social issues as well, like the Strong Lungs program that we contributed to as an APA organisation. Really push other professional leaders to come up with the consistent cultural safety framework, and I think that's a huge piece. So looking for APC that you're involved with, Mick, APA, CP, DANS, and also our regulator, the Physio Board of Australia as well. So really pushing that. And then even wider, we're pushing internationally. I'm attending conferences and doing some keynote speaking on our reconciliation and where that can be implemented, and the same opportunities that may arise in other countries around the world. We would never see that in the past. So I think as an APA journey and an APA bravery and really stepping outside their comfort zone, we're doing this. So to be brave and put out our very first Deadly Physio podcast series, that was just unheard of like years ago, where now we're really testing the waters and really forging ahead with that type of thing as well. So we need to be brave and work with, but also push the government employment pathways for Indigenous communities as well. I've met with Minister Wyatt and really forced him to look at where physiotherapy fits in that and where allied health fits in that. And he's committed to work with the APA, hopefully, if he does get re-elected or the next government that comes into power, that we continue that journey with them. But this doesn't happen overnight as well. And it doesn't happen without vision, without leadership. And again, I think that's where the APA has really been strong with our leaders of the past and our leaders now, but also the future as well. So I feel so safe and comfortable to really open up and talk about my journey, but also makes me proud that as an organisation with over 31,000 members takes this really serious and does what it's going to say it's going to do. It just doesn't talk the talk. It actually starting to implement some of these tangible examples and really looking at trying to get some change happening. So I think we are brave and we are making change, and that's what makes me a proud president of the APA.
It's deadly work, Scott, and I'd echo those sentiments as well. But I want to hear from Katie. Katie, as a Kamilaroi woman, you've just heard what our organisation, what the Physiotherapy Association is doing. You've heard the great leadership, not just from Scott, but from the board, executive team, and from we've had firsthand the leadership from all our special interest groups and leaders right across the profession in this space. How does that make you feel to be part of a profession and an organisation that champions those things? And how do you think it might make other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander physio students and maybe high school students considering that's a profession to feel?
It will seem like I'm going off topic, but I will tie it back in. You mentioned, hopefully that in schools, people are learning different history to what you learnt in school. And ironically, just the other day over Anzac Day, I watched an Anzac movie, and at the very end of the movie, which is not an old movie, it said, Australia has never been invaded. And I was like, oh, so, we still don't have the truth telling. And what I really love is that the APA provides a lot of space for that. So having these sessions today, having the Deadly Physio podcast, having the articles in Emotion, having the different funding for different activities and research, there's just so much going on. And so as a physiotherapist inside this organisation, it really empowers me, and I feel really safe and really confident and comfortable to put forward ideas or to provide feedback on issues, which has not been as easy in other organisations. And so what that actually gives me is a lot of, I feel a lot more power and strength to take that to other places that I'm working as well, because I really feel the physio APA is really setting by example. And so we can actually help others on their journey, because I from lots of different RAPs I've seen in different organisations, I think this is by far the most impressive I've ever seen, and actually seeing the deliverables, And so I know there's others out there, but just maybe some I'm not privy to, but the ones that I have ever been involved with, they're starting their journey too, and that's fine. And so everyone's on a journey where they are, but I really love how the APA is thinking outside the box and really pushing the envelope to grow. And I feel like they are allowing First Nations people to have a voice at the table, and that's in many different aspects of that RAP. Looking at workforce development, so with inside the APA, putting that outward focus onto helping the physiotherapy practices to become more culturally safe, looking through the lens of helping students become more culturally safe in practice, but also making universities a safe place for students to be in. So and within that RAP, everything fits within inside that, and there's lots of actions that I think are all integrated into all those issues. And I think when Scott's talking about the social determinants of health, giving our people that permission to have that authority allows us to then take that experience and knowledge into those other areas as well, so that we can actually make some bigger impacts on health, because we know it's a lot more than just looking at the specific health problem that they're coming in with, condition that they're coming in with. So if the APA can help us to broaden our minds about what we can do as citizens, not only as physiotherapists, to help with improving all those social determinants of health, I think is a great thing.
That's beautifully said, Katie, and I would probably echo my own thoughts with that as well, that this is what cultural safety looks like. In an organisation where you can express yourself, you feel welcome to present your opinions without judgment, and they're respected and acknowledged. And as an Aboriginal man, I see that in the APA, and I see it very wholeheartedly. I feel my opinions are welcomed, and I'm so glad that you see that as well, Katie. And I think that means a lot for our emerging profession, or our brothers and sisters coming through the ranks into our broader family. The APA has shown a lot of leadership here with reconciliation, but I know there's a lot of business owners out there, and maybe organisations from small to medium businesses, to maybe heads of departments in hospitals, etc. Maybe university programs. How can they start to engage in reconciliation? How can they harness that same cultural desire to put things right? And what are some of the first steps that they might consider taking? I'll leave this question open to both of you.
Yeah, look, Mick, I think first up, looking for your local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health service and contacting them. I know I did that probably about 10 years ago, and was pleasantly surprised at some of the services and connectivity that it's led to, and just that service delivery and the requirements that they require, and what expertise and qualities I have to provide that to their service as well. So, you might have a special offering. You might be a paediatric physiotherapist that they're looking for to actually provide some paediatric services to some of their consumers. So really just ringing them, having a talk, sitting down, but also I think asking someone from there or an elder to come and just have a talk to you, or have a yarning session with you and your staff, to actually start learning about some of the local Indigenous history, so that you know the wrongs of the past and the rights and the connection of the land, sea, culture, the people. I think you'd be really, really surprised at what you learn. And some of the physio practices I know that have contacted me and have done that have all said, why haven't we done this years ago? Like, this is just an amazing, and it drives and gets their thirst to learn more about their local Indigenous culture. And I think if you don't understand that, you'll never know why we want to reconciliation is so important. I think just having someone come and talk to your staff meeting, a short story about something of local, go and buy some Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and Australian flags to put at your reception desk, just to make it more welcoming to those peoples to come in. But it's also a talking point. I know a lot of people that come into our clinic, they go, what's that third flag? I've never seen that before. I say, that's a Torres Strait Islander flag. And they go, where's that? And so it's a starting point for talking about not just health issues, but also a learning of other cultures, other areas of Australia that they probably do not have any idea about. So I think, that's really, really good start. I think putting a welcome sign of an acknowledgement of their local traditional owners of the land which your clinic sits is really, really powerful as well. And again, a few clinics have done that, and it just, again, drives a bit of discussion, but also it just really makes it more welcome for your local Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander community to come in and feel like they're part of of your clinic as well. On your patient registration forms, have an area where you can actually tick a box that you identify as a First Nations origin, and put that on your software. Nearly every software vendor has an opportunity to do that now, and it's part of reconciliation throughout the health services as well. Even looking at making a discount or accepting the rebate for a care plan under Medicare goes a long way as well, just for that access and making sure that we look after our First Nations people as well. And then probably just look at your local area of interest and see if there's any like Indigenous stories that exist and the history behind them. Look for local artists to connect with that may be able to do an artistic piece to put into your clinic. I think they're the types of really tangible, simple things that you can do. One, to make people feel welcome from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, but also to spark a bit of conversation, a bit of knowledge, a bit of education, and then to get that thirst for your local community to actually understand but delve into it a bit deeper. I think they're the types of things clinics can do quite easily without a lot of resources.
Yeah, it's quite regionally specific, isn't it? It's not a one size fits all at all. It's about getting to know your local area, local people, local lands. Katie, you've seen some really successful examples of reconciliation in businesses. Can you reflect on maybe one or two of those that business owners or department heads or whoever might be able to reflect upon?
Sure. So I think, so talking in that bigger picture, looking at providing identified positions, and that might not necessarily be as a physiotherapist, so it may be administration, any sort of support work, and hopefully in some leadership positions as well. So if there's a board, ensuring that there's a First Nations voice on the board. I think procurement is a huge one. And if we talk about trying to have an impact on the social determinants of health, then procurement is huge, because supporting Indigenous business does help to give back. I can't remember the dollar figures, but it's when you invest in Indigenous business, the dollar value that goes back into Indigenous communities is really significant. And it's just the nature of Indigenous businesses, of what they do in terms of employment and them supporting other Indigenous businesses to have people have their own self-determination. So they're probably like the big things for me. I really like the collaboration that's happening. So the APA doing a lot of work with the Physio Council, with APRA, and some of the things I'm involved with currently, as the APC has just hired some First Nation staff as accreditation panel members, so I'm lucky to be one of them. And then we're looking at getting the cultural safety training package reviewed, and so I was lucky again to be on that review panel, and all of that just all melts together. It's hard to separate which hat you're wearing. I mean, obviously you know which hat you're wearing when you're doing the job, but there's just so much collaboration. It's beautiful. And now working to say, is there space for the APA to be able to spread that out to a wider audience, so that's great. So kind of then I'll sort of filter back down to some of the levels Scott was talking about more locally in the clinics, and that collaboration is really important. So with a lot of the consulting work I do, one of the biggest frustrations is that people coming in with funding to work on a project, but prior to doing that, there's been no co-design, no checking what's already happening in the local communities. So, really good to work with the local communities to see where the gaps are and what's needed, because there's no point reproducing something, if that's not the reason why your service isn't being accessed. And it's a huge frustration for a lot of the Aboriginal controlled health services. When that funding runs out, then the community is often left without any service, so there's no follow-on from that. So you can understand that it keeps building that sense of distrust. The other thing I would like to mention, which I just literally saw over the last couple of days, is I love the idea of the tri-flags and the artwork and the acknowledgement of country in the workplaces. I was looking at websites, searching for myself for a physiotherapist because I'm moving, and so I need to find one where I'm going. And out of about the 10 different sites I looked on, not one of them had an acknowledgement of country on their website. And I thought, so that, you know, was in this digital era, it doesn't have, it should also be on our internet platforms and not just in our site, because otherwise they're not even going to come. So that was one of the first things I actually looked for. And then I looked for the expertise of the physiotherapists. And so, you know, I'm an Aboriginal woman, but I don't necessarily always be looking to go to the AMSs as well. So I'm looking for convenience, time, all of that expertise. So where I can find that, I'll find that. If that's in an AMS in the public health system or in a private, then that's where I'll go. So I'll make my decisions based on that, not based on, and then if I feel it's a safe place to go. The other thing that I want to say that I realized I had done, and I'm going to change it. I've actually sent an email already this morning before this talk, because I thought, hang on, I've got to try to practice what I'm preaching. And so we do have our acknowledgement on our website, and we do a lot of work with having units with Indigenous art, which was driven by community. They were asking me for that. Because we've got an Australian and an American website, we've got the geolocation at the top with a flag, an Australian flag and an American flag. And I wrote to the web designer this morning, I was like, you know, the Australian flag, it really should be a tri-flag. Is that possible to change? So I'll see if they can put that little icon in, and I hope that that's something that exists. So practice what I preach, and then I'll be looking to the USA and seeing what sort of flags they might have as their First Nations. I don't know that they have one unifying flag, which might be a problem. They might have 50. But so anyway, so just thinking in that space. And then I felt like I had another, and then the so easy to do to connect with your community is go to the events, the reconciliation events. Just go. We talk about being brave, standing up, and then the NAIDOC week, you know, showing up. And I say that for our allies as well. You know, we are a very welcoming group, and come along. So the Reconciliation Week events, they're everywhere, and you should be able to find it on events on Reconciliation Australia. But even if you just jump on Facebook and search for your local community things, you can find them. And then the same thing goes for Close the Gap events and NAIDOC Week events, and you'll start to get to meet people that way and just start to get to see a bit about how the culture works in practice too. You know, like I love when I went overseas, just watching people and being immersed in culture. And I think you can do that here as well, you know, and at those events, it's very rich. So there's some of the things that I would encourage people to do.
That's beautiful, Katie. Some really, really interesting points there for people to consider. It's interesting, a lot of small businesses or physio businesses don't have, reconciliation on their website anywhere. And we talk about going through the customer experience, you know, and a walkthrough into the journey into your practice. And sometimes with cultural things, it requires a different worldview. So to see things through a different person's lens and come with a sense of cultural humility. And I think that's what you described really well, Katie, is for owners to start to consider those things and then take the next step and be brave, respect with flags and things, but then take the next step and provide opportunities and build relationships with other allies, so non-Indigenous allies and Indigenous people alike. Moving down to just what you can do, what can you do on Monday morning question for an individual? So someone who says, well, I can't do that, it's all too hard. APA is going to do that for me. I don't need to be part of this. What would you say to those people? Why is it important that the average member or the average, or how have I written this, that physios and non-physio muggles alike can engage in reconciliation? How can they do it? Scott?
Yeah, look, the first step I would recommend is to have a look at the Reconciliation Australia website. I think it's got some really, really good resources, but some information pieces as well as why reconciliation is so important, but also the different components of reconciliation that they break it down to, and it just really makes that all just come together. And I think then it makes your thought process a lot better and a lot easier to move forwards. Also look at the APA's RAP section and their website. It's up. The new RAP is up on the website as of last Thursday. You know, all the information about our RAP is there. I'd also recommend taking a look at the Closing the Gap summary as well, which really just summarises some of those social determinants of health and social inequalities that exist. So it just starts making you think about what impact can you have on your local community, especially. I think also just step outside your comfort zone and do a cultural experience. Look in your local area, or even if you're on holiday, you know, just have a look and see what's available around there. You know, if you don't want to go and do a jet ski or a paraglide or anything like that, go and do an Indigenous experience. It's an eye-opener. I think everywhere Kathryn and myself go now, we always look for what we can do to actually just become part of the local community and what offerings that there are there. And it's just amazing what you learn. It's that next level, I think, that really inspires you then to come home and go, oh, maybe we could look at something that's locally, and it just pushes your boundaries a little bit more. Look at ways you can link with your local Indigenous community as well. It might be through the medical service. It could be just there might be some type of ceremony or acknowledgement that's happening, or a walk that's happening. Just have a look and see what's available in your own community as well. But I think also just start looking at ways you can make some changes in your own personal but professional life to start or progress your own personal journey as well. You know, just start thinking about, well, even your language. Or would that offend some Indigenous people? Would that offend me if I was an Indigenous or a First Nations person? And see how you can actually rephrase what you talk about. Because unless you start, like we do it as a professional reflection, our clinical reflection, and we do that every day or after every patient, but we very rarely do it for reconciliation. And I really think that people need to start doing that. And the election is coming up, and I've got to say that Scott Morrison says it's not a race. Okay, and it's been posted all over socials and things like that. So go at your own pace. Go at your own pace and feel proud that you're doing something. You're doing something brave, and hopefully you can make change. So yeah, it's not a race, but you've got to start somewhere. You've got to progress, do something brave, and try and make some change in your local community.
Katie, I'll rephrase the question very slightly for you. And I see a lot of patients who didn't grow up in Australia, who maybe have only been here for a couple of years. And what would you say to those physios that maybe didn't do their training in Australia, who aren't aware or weren't as aware of these issues before today's talk? What would you say to them as some great first steps or next steps to take in their cultural journeys?
So that I would then say would be going to some of the events, because you'll hear the speakers and you'll hear why it's important to those local communities where you are at that point in time. And then it might be a bit challenging to put it into practice, but looking at the reconciliation website, Australian Reconciliation website, and then looking through the APA RAP and sort of seeing if you can put that information together and start to make those connections with what you've learned at the events that you went to and what you saw. So we talk a lot in our culture about listening, learning, and then acting. And so it is just absorbing as much as possible first, learning from it, and then acting. So it can be a slow process, which is usually the better process because it is a very thoughtful process when you're trying to make meaningful change rather than tokenistic change. And I was going to ask if I can offer a challenge to our viewing members today.
Please do.
In the hospital I work, all the physios are really competitive. So you offer a challenge and that works a treat. So I was going to, and your question was about what can people, international people do. So potentially taking this to their bosses if they're listening. We have a social media group, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Committee group. It may change its name, but I'd love to see more and more allies there. So I talk about this space as being safe, not only for Indigenous people, but for our allies as well. And we understand everyone is in a different place in their learning journey. So we will very respectfully help you with questions that you may have and put them out there, rather than messaging the page privately, write to the group and let's see what the group responses are. And that's that listening, learning, and acting. So what I'd love to do is challenge people to ask their bosses to add to their website acknowledgement of country on the website as a little pane somewhere, however they want to do it. And then jump onto the social media group and say, I asked my boss to do this, or my boss did this, or my workplace did this. Let people know, show people what's happening. If you've read the RAP, go on that page and tell people I've read the RAP, and maybe list one point that you really liked about the RAP. So they're the challenges I'd love to give people, because I'd love to see what's happening. And I think on that social media group, that's where we can all start to see it. And I'd love to see more and more allies joining that group with us.
I love that connection. I love that challenge, Katie. And we'll be sure to add that link in the eTalk description after this eTalk. You said to me earlier your dreams for a reconciled Australia. Scott, you dreamt of something that an Australia without racism, without discrimination, where there was equality and equity, where the gaps were closed. And once we achieved some of these things, then we could celebrate these things together. Katie, you talked, and I think that they're quite complementary to each other. You yearn for a more balanced, peaceful place where diversity was respected, and not just of people, but of lands and waterways as well, which I think a lot of Australians hold dear. Do you think, what are your hopes, maybe in your lifetime, for these things to be achieved? And I suppose it sounds like the APA is on the right track. Do we think the profession's on the right track? Do we think healthcare is on the right track? Scott? Yeah,
look, I think, like I said before, I think the APA are the leaders in this space, and I think I find that very good, and I'm very proud of that. And I think the profession will come along with us. It will take some time. I think for us as a profession, we need all our leaders of all these different groups within our profession to really have a consistent framework to start from in order to get that cultural awareness, that cultural safety, consistent, and that will then flow on to building this foundation that we need to get, because then we can build on top of that foundation to even become more braver. And that's where the APA is at the moment. I think the profession needs that foundation to start with, and then we can build on top of that. So I think we need leaders to continue to push this journey over the coming 5, 10, 20 years to ensure that not just our members, but also all our professionals have access to this, what we talk about, why is so important, and how we're going to do it, and what assistance and guidance is really readily available as well. So I think it's my mission to continue the momentum for this journey, but also to assist any member on their personal and professional journey, so that we reap the benefits of the whole profession reaps the benefit to seeing equity, equality throughout Australia, but also to make Australia an even better place to live, work, play, and see those real possible things that that Australians are so good at doing, to come together and for the benefit of the human race, really. And I think the profession can do that, and not just the APA, but I think the profession can be leaders in this area if we continue on our journey that we're doing now.
Katie, do you echo those thoughts that the profession can move from just this global goodwill that seems to exist here at the moment and move that into core business?
Absolutely. And I think that, like I mentioned earlier, just the deliverables that they have in their app really is helping people to give that voice. And when Scott mentions the foundations, you know, that's so important for people moving forward. And I think I should have said earlier too, not just respecting each other's differences, but really valuing each other's differences. So in my lifetime, I hope that that's where we move to, that, you know, we do value each other's perspectives and cultures. And, you know, we are such a beautiful multicultural country. And I know I feel like I value a lot of other cultures, and I wish that would be the same for us as well. And I hope that the strain on our mobs can be reduced. So I hope that the work being done with the APA really pushing that envelope and empowering our First Nations people, I hope in my lifetime that I'm seeing less and less strain on my community, my family, and then other communities around as well.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Katie. And we're coming to the end of our yarning for now. Well, there'll be plenty of yarns beyond this, but I just wanted to hear, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners or the audience there, Scott?
Yeah, look, I think when you're looking at change, I think you need appetite and timing. I think there's a true appetite throughout the country, but also within this profession to look at reconciliation. I think the timing is right. I think now in the journey of reconciliation, I think the timing is right. I just really urge and really push our members to start or continue on their personal and professional journey, wherever that is, just to just think about it, to step outside their comfort zone a little bit, because what you put into it, I can guarantee you're going to get a lot more out of it. And it is a very, very special journey if you start it, and the places that it will take you, I don't think you can imagine yet. And I just really, really plead with everyone to just think about it, have a look at it, step outside your comfort zone and start or continue your own journey.
I'm excited for the profession already, Scott. And Katie, any final thoughts from you?
Sort of on top of what Scott has said, particularly if you don't have a RAP in the organisation that you work, if you do, you know, read the committee meetings, notes and things like that. But if you don't, the APA's RAP, I think, is a really good guide for people to give ideas of how they can make some changes in their own workplaces and in their own lives as well. And because it is always a learning journey, maybe when you hear a NAIDOC week is coming up, or you see a advert from the APA for a Deadly Physio podcast or something, maybe as a trigger, or you can put in your calendar every 3 months, just have a quick look over the RAP again, because of your learning journey. What you see today and then what you read in 3 months can be quite different, and you'll pick different points out and actually make different or change your activity based on where you are. So I love to reread those documents throughout the year, which may make me a bit of a nerd, but they seem a bit dry. But once you get used to them, then you can really start to reflect on what those elements mean. And yeah, so I think read it and then reread it. I think it was Professor Karma that said, leaders are readers and readers are leaders. So I liked that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Katie. And well, that brings us sort of to the end. So Mundangu, thank you. Very deep thank you to both you, Kathryn Potter and Scott Willis, for your sharing your stories, insights, and your very beautiful culture with us today. For your listeners, I do hope this has left you with a greater understanding of the why, what, and how of reconciliation with Australia's First Peoples and what your next steps might be. As Scott mentioned, cultural development is a lifelong journey. It takes time, but it's also incredibly rewarding. To help you, please find the APA's latest reconciliation plan on the APA website, and check out the Deadly Physios podcast as well. Links to all of these things will be in the show details below. Also, as mentioned also during the podcast, Reconciliation Australia's website has a huge amount of resources around reconciliation, really practical ways that you can be involved with reconciliation in this country. There's no tick box answer. You don't say, I've got to do this, this, and this to be culturally safe. It's a journey, and it's something that you'll get a lot out of. So until our paths meet again, Yalu.